everyone. I'm Rejoice on Umatta Consulting Podcast. Today we have the special privilege of speaking with Roy, and Roy is the founder and managing partner of Prestige Search. Before I ask him to introduce himself, I would love to also share with our audience. If you are first time with us, please subscribe to all of our social media platforms, especially Spotify, where you will be getting the full video content. So, Roy, if you don't mind introducing yourself as you see fit, and then we will dive right into the questions. The mic is yours.
Excellent. Thank you so much for having me on the show. As you mentioned, I'm Rory Verrett. I am the managing partner of Protege Search. We have two businesses under our flagship brand. We have the executive search arm, in which we represent companies and nonprofits, startups, venture capital funds in recruiting talent. And we also have an executive coaching arm, in which we offer executive coaching to high potential and executive leaders. And we offer the Protege Leadership Academy, which has a career transition blueprint, which is a job search platform to help people get the really coveted jobs in the market.
Awesome, awesome. It sounds like you guys have a handful of items going on under your belt. First question for you, Roy. Can you share a bit about your journey and what inspired you to sort of focus on recruiting or search firms in general?
So I had a very circuitous route to executive search. There's an expression in the executive recruiting industry that the recruiting industry selects you, you don't select it, and that nobody grows up saying, "Hey, I want to be an executive headhunter." And so I was the same way. I was actually a candidate on a search. The first third of my career was primarily spent in policy and politics. I did that in different formats. I was a candidate for public office. I was a lobbyist. I worked on Capitol Hill, and I had what was essentially a government contracting firm where we sold software to governments. The second third of my career was in executive search. I sent my resume to a search firm as I was winding down a company, and they said, "You'd be a great recruiter." And I was like, "That's interesting. I don't know what you guys do. Let's talk about this policy role." And they kept sort of insisting that I consider this. And I, went through 17 interviews and said I would take it and do it for a year. That was 20 years ago this year. And so I was at two of the big search firms, and the NFL, the National Football League, was a client. I became their head of talent management. What kept me in search and what I suspected was that you could really help people in their careers. That in executive recruiting, there's a lot at stake. You're talking about jobs that pay on the low end $250,000. I have placed people in jobs where the compensation is pushing $2 million. So you've got a lot of money on the line. And to make sure that clients include everyone, that they look at the absolute best talent that's available and not just the people that are always on the list that might be talented or might not be talented, I thought that was an important role to play. So I've always had an inclusive mindset with my recruiting persona. And the last sort of third of my career has been as a pure entrepreneur doing both executive coaching and executive recruiting.
Amazing, amazing background. It sounds
Thank
like
you.
you've had a tremendous amount of experience in this area, and I can hear that it sounds like it's your passion as well. Could you tell us a little bit about some of the biggest challenges involving executive facing, I guess, right now in the search firm, especially with uncertainty in the job market?
hmm I think that there are certain tendencies that we have in our job search that are bad habits. And we come at them honestly, but if you have been in a job for 5 to 10 years and you haven't interviewed in a while, you haven't been a job search in a while, what are you going to do? You're going to do the same things that worked 5 or 10 years ago. Well, the world has changed in 5 or 10 years. There's a whole new way to approach a job search, and you have changed. You may have been a middle manager, you may have been in the early part of your career. You're now much more advanced. And so the interview process is different, the way you activate your network is different. The way you have an executive resume is different. The way you show up on social media is different. And a lot of people do what they know to do, which is dated and in many ways outdated. I tell people I've been married 20 years this year. It's like if I became single, I don't know what to do. I mean, they got all these apps and stuff. Like I got my wife's number on a napkin at a jazz concert. I don't know what to do. So I think people have that same outdated set of techniques, and they should update them. There's a whole lot of technology, AI, there is old fashioned shoe leather networking that you have to do. And you put it all together, there is a bit of a template about what works in your job search.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I love the analogy with the marriage, and if someone were to leave a marriage, it's a mind blower right now. Going back on the
Right.
market is
I
extremely.
mean, I'm gonna show up in like Sergio Valente jeans. I'm gonna give you candy from like the drugstore. I'm gonna give you the balloon with the stuffed animal in it. I don't know what to do.
Very true. Very true. What industries are currently thriving, in your opinion, and what are some executives focus? What should executives focus on in their job search right now? In terms
Yes, so I
in
would say there are three industries that are doing quite well. Healthcare is doing quite well.
mm,
AI based companies. So that's AI consulting firms, startups that have AI as the center of their product launch or their product suite, and communications. What I mean by that is professional services firms that are doing communications and PR. Those three sectors tend to be doing pretty well. Obviously, the government is not doing well as a place to get hired.
right.
Nonprofits are getting their funding cut. That's not really a good place for long term or maybe short term stability. But those three areas are important. And I think you have to focus on a few things. Number one, I think you have to activate your network in a way that is appropriate for the kind of job search you want to do. Number two, you have to show up in an interview, in a high stakes interview. If the job market is tight, it means every role is competitive. I had a stat on my podcast on YouTube, the Protege Leadership Academy, that said that for every open job, there are at least 250 applications. Okay. So if you have that kind of competition, it means you've got to really win a game of inches. It's not your whether you're qualified or not. Likely of those 250 people, 200 of them
Mhm.
are qualified. What's going to make you the one that stands out in the process? I think your interview is hugely important. And then increasingly at the mid-career and executive level, because the job market is so competitive, companies are now asking candidates to do a case study. They will give you a problem set to solve for. We have this strategy. What would you do? Some people are sort of chafing at that's companies and organizations getting free consulting. But a
Right.
lot of times it's not necessarily a real problem they're solving for. It's not like they've got five priorities, they're giving you one of them to solve for. They already have people that are doing that. It is just to try to get you to think critically, to
Mm,
present in a certain way, to use data in a certain way, to look at the ambiguity in the case study and fill in some blanks or ask questions about what data might be appropriate. And so a lot of people are surprised by that. Again, you've been in a job and you've been in your job for 7 years. Not you were a manager when you went in, now you're a vice president. You're interviewing for a senior vice president job. I guarantee you there's a good chance you're going to have a case study
right.
in that. And you haven't done a case study because you've been promoted from within. So I think those three things: activating your network, mastering and acing your interview, and really showing up smartly in that case study to really wow that jury of executives on the other side.
Makes sense. I love the way you sort of put all three together. Very important. It doesn't sound like you can sort of skim through these things right now in these difficult times.
No, it's sort of like if you're at the Olympics and you're in the decathlon. You've got to be well, do well in all of those events. You can't just be, well, I'm a great sprinter, but I'm not good with javelin or I'm not good with hurdles. You've got to be really, really good at every event. And the same is true in your job search. You've got to be great at activating your network, great at your interview, great at your case study, great at your references. You got to have your LinkedIn and your resume activated appropriately for the kinds of jobs you want. You've got to show up a certain way on social media. And most people just think, oh, I'm a good speaker. I interview well. And they get somebody, they overpay for somebody to look at their resume and they show up. And it's like, no, the person that wins the job that pays $400,000 a year has done all of this stuff and they prepared every step of the way. And they are a half an inch ahead of you, a quarter inch ahead of you, 2 inches ahead of you. And by the end of it, they got you by a foot and they get the job.
Exactly, exactly. I think you've already answered this, but I'm curious if you can expand on it a little bit. What are some common mistakes executives most likely will make when they're transitioning to a new role, aside from what you have mentioned already?
So I would say, starting with the end of the process, they do not focus on their first 30 days. They do not think about how to optimize the first set of priorities and projects they're going to tackle at that organization. They just think, I got a new job. I'm an expert in communications or marketing or law. I'm going to come in there and do my thing. And there's a whole lot of nuance about understanding reporting structures, understanding what the priorities are. So if you interviewed for a job, if I called you for a job in January, okay, and by the time a company calls me, they've been thinking about this job since last June or July.
Right.
They put a requisition out, they think about it, they decide, are we going to use a search firm or go internal? Blah, blah, blah. They decide on a search firm. We interview in November. They hire us in December. The search starts in January. So I mention that because the business priority, the business
Mhm.
problems that they're trying to solve for have been set in June.
Right.
They've been set in June, and they're now trying to find the solution to it, which is an executive, and I'm a tool to help them get that executive. So now I'm interviewing in January. The search process takes on average 90 days. You get the offer end of March. You're an executive, you got a big job, you can't leave on Friday and start your new job on Monday. So you start May 15th. That is almost an entire year that has
Mhm.
passed. So one thing you got to do is refresh and revisit those priorities. Are the problems you wanted me to solve for in June, which necessitated this recruiting effort, do those still stand? Have they shifted? Almost always they've shifted somewhat. Have they changed? What's the budget behind them? What's the head count behind them? So thinking about those first 30 days, what the priorities are, who are the people in the organization that can help you get your job done? Hint, it's not just the people reporting into you and your boss. There are all sorts of people that are likely
Yeah.
laterals to you in the organization that are what I call the culture carriers. They know where the bodies are buried. They know how stuff really gets done. They've got the ear of the CEO, even though they are 2 or 3 levels down from the CEO. You got to know who those people are. And then, thirdly, I think in this era where there are so many ways of communicating, there's in person, there's Zoom, there's Slack, there's texting, there's
Mhm.
emailing, there's calling. Finding out, how do the people you have to influence want to be communicated with? Does your staff, who might be younger than you, do they want
Mhm.
Slack or text? Does your boss not have or not use a kind of newfangled smartphone, and they're like, yeah, I got a phone, but I don't really, I put that down during work. And so
Right.
you text them and you never get response. Maybe they want a phone call. If they're a boomer or they're Gen X, they still want a phone call. So
Mhm.
managing those 4 generations in the workforce and figuring out how to communicate in that way and to verify that, I think, is hugely important. So I think those are 3 things to think about when you get the job. Your job search isn't over. It's really the first 30, 60, 90 days that are really critical.
Exactly, exactly. It sounds like those are like the metrics that would sort of set you up for success or failure if
Right.
you're not meeting up par and so forth. And then the politics, right? Like you mentioned, the
Right.
cultural carriers that are sort of leading the way. What are some key elements of an effective executive job search strategies that you would recommend?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because I have spent years thinking about this. As an executive recruiter on the client side, companies and organizations hire us to manage a search process. A lot of people think, as a recruiting firm, we represent candidates. They'll call me and say, "Hey, can you get me a job?" And I'm like, "We're not a candidate agency. We are a retained executive search firm." Those firms are called contingency firms. We are a retained executive search firm. So I spent years thinking about this because I get hundreds over the years. I've gotten thousands of people reaching out to me saying, "Hey, what can I do to get a job? What can I do to interview better?" I had a call before this with somebody I placed early in their career, and they're like, "Hey, I'm interviewing for this job. I have these questions for you." Like, so imagine over 20 years, I'm getting thousands of these calls. And the answer was, "Hey, I can't place you. That's ethically, I can't do that." And I was like, but I just gave them some advice. And I'm interviewing candidates who are on a search that are viable for a search. I have to help them interview better. I'll tell them, you don't really tell those transition stories about how you move between jobs really well. Spend 20 minutes with me before you go into the client and let's do a mock interview. I see a lot of people call me for negotiation advice. So what
Mm,
I've done is I've put together all of the elements for a mid-career professional and an executive leader to do an effective job search in a competitive environment. It's called the Career Transition Blueprint. It's at protégeleadershipacademy.com. It includes 10 digital courses that takes you through everything. It's about 3 hours of content. These are busy executives but we break down the mental mindset you need in a job search. People underestimate how alienating, how lonely, how frustrating, how depressing it can be, especially if you're doing the old stuff like applying online and waiting to hear back. Good luck with that. Or waiting for a recruiter to call you. Good luck with that. That's not going to get you in the door of the jobs you want. So there are things you can do in terms of your mindset. There
mm,
is an assessment tool we have that I take my corporate coaching clients through that I've built into this module for you to figure out what is it that you do absolutely well. How do you figure that out? How do you replicate that? How do you search for that in your job search? Once
mm,
you understand that, again, we're going macro to micro. Once you have your mentality and mindset, once you understand what your superhero strength is, then we're going to talk about how do you activate that and show that in your resume and LinkedIn. How do you actually put that and put that in a format that it lets the market know I'm looking for this, not that. I do this, not that. I'm strong in these areas, less strong in these areas. Once you have that, how do you activate your network to get them to take this information, this mentality, this mindset, this clarity, and say, I'm looking for these kind of roles because
mm,
I have these kinds of skills. And then it's game time. How do you take all that and manifest it in an interview, in a case study, in optimizing your references? How do you negotiate effectively? And then how do you get off to a great start in your first 30 days? So we've taken all of this and put it in this format. That's the courses. We also put you in a blueprint community of other executives to peer network, not only
mm,
now, but for the rest of your career. We I've archived the 70 podcasts I've done. I had a show called Protege Podcast where I interview people like Valerie Jarrett and Deval Patrick, the Deputy Commissioner of the NBA. How, getting those nuggets of wisdom from those leaders who are a step ahead of you. We also have a monthly newsletter and I show up live to answer your questions twice a month for 90 minutes. We had our first session last week. We started the blueprint in early April. We had our first session last week. It was amazing. I answer specific questions about compensation, negotiation, anything about the modules. And so an incredibly beneficial and modernized way to do a job search. And we have it priced at a fire sale price until May 7th, where it's going to approach market pricing. I mean, I'm just being honest. I charge clients $2,500 a month for executive coaching. This is a fraction of that because some people can't afford $7,500 for intensive coaching, but this gives you the core and more for an effective job search.
Makes sense. I mean, from the way you're describing the package, it's just very thorough, and
Mhm.
it takes a lot of time to sort of reach those nuggets. And I love that you're thinking about competitiveness, right? How an executive can be competitive. And I heard some few things you talked about regarding personal branding. So I'm just curious, what is the role? What does the role of personal branding sort of play in securing top executive positions, in your opinion?
Great question. There is a attention economy that we are in. Chris Hayes, who's an MSNBC pundit, has a book about that. And he says basically the most valuable commodity in the market is your attention. And you think about it, when you start looking at social media and you add up the number of hits to your brain of advertising,
Right.
posts on all these different platforms, let alone TV and everything. So people are vying for your attention.
Hmm.
So the same is true when you are in a job search. People will make a simple sort of declaration or understanding of who you are and what you stand for. I guarantee you, if you ask people, what is my brand? Oh, you're this, you're this, or that. With me, I'm sure people will say, you're always talking about jobs. You're always talking about Portugal, where I live, and you're always talking about wine because I run a wine club. So if ask ChatGPT, what is Rory Verrett? What are his values? Like wine, family, career, and Portugal. All right. So that's because that's how I show up on social media. That's what I talk
Right.
about. That's what I comment about. As a recruiter, when we do a search, I look at everything. I look at everything. And we have an expression, we say everything is data. So I look at your resume. I look at LinkedIn. I look at social media. I can put your name in AI apps and figure out what is this person's brand in your opinion. It never disqualifies someone per se, but it gives me a rounded out picture. One case it did disqualify. When I worked at the NFL, there was a candidate, he was not qualified for the role, but I was just going through LinkedIn profiles, and this guy was sitting at a restaurant with a bib on, eating lobster with a cell phone to his ear, and had the waiter behind him, like looking aggravated. Now, it was probably staged, but that was his LinkedIn photo. And again, he was not even in the functional line, but he just came up in the algorithm. And I was like, why would somebody have a picture like that?
Right.
And I've never forgot that. That's been almost 12 years ago. But it was a curiosity. And so you got to think about how your picture looks. When somebody looks at your LinkedIn profile, they can see what you commented on, what you've liked. And that says a lot. I tell people LinkedIn is like going to a conference. Would you go to a conference with a boombox on your shoulder blasting Nas? No, you would not do that. You can do that on Facebook, but on LinkedIn, you want to show up with corporate casual, maybe a blazer, a nice attache, your resume handy, some materials. You're not going to be dapping people up and taking, jello shots. You're going to be a little more starched up. So show up on LinkedIn in a way that is indicative of the values, the subject matter, your interests, so that people can get a fuller view of you beyond just your resume. I give you one last example. We were doing a search for a client, and the client got down to two candidates. And she said, just for kicks and giggles, I put both of their names in YouTube. YouTube. One person didn't have anything. Like most, I have a YouTube channel now, but I wasn't on YouTube, 6 months ago. So the guy had nothing. The woman had 5 or 6 conferences that she was a panelist on, and like we all should do, set up a little tripod with her iPhone, and it wasn't professionally produced. It was just, and she's sitting there, and she's very articulate, very poised, very insightful. So my client sits there and watches 5 of those videos. She watches on average 20 minutes of her speaking. So she's watching, over an hour more of content. Who do you think got the job?
Person she was watching.
Not that the guy wasn't poised and articulate either, but he didn't show it. So things like that, again, in a game of inches, everything counts.
Very true. Everything counts. Everything counts. Exactly. Unless it's a song by Nas, I know I can,
You can maybe bring that on your phone with your earbuds. You can't come in with a boombox like you're ready with me.
Exactly.
That's not.
Exactly. Exactly. I know you talked about the importance of networking in person or maybe on social media platforms. How important is networking in general? And what are the best ways for people to sort of build meaningful connections in leadership circles?
We cover this a lot in the blueprint, and there are many things you can do. I'll give you one for free here, which is counterintuitive. You have to, over the long arc of your career, get into the favor business. People think networking is, well, it falls more naturally on extroverts. Not true. I'm an introvert. I can't do that. Be in the favor business. So I love wine. I love wine. It's kind of my passion. I study it more than I drink it, to be honest. I geek out about it more than I actually consume it. But I'm a president of a wine club here in Europe. So every event we have, every month, we have anywhere from 20 to 40 people who show up. Now, that I'm not getting paid for that. It doesn't cost me any money either, but it's a fun thing to do, but it's also a networking thing to do. And people are, thank you so much for organizing this, as if I, constructed the wine bar brick by brick. I made the wine. I just called the wine bar, previewed it, went there, talked to the woman, said we're going to show up at this time, and we had an event. But it seems like a favor to people. It seems like I'm doing something for them. And that's a positive thing. It's not I'm showing up at their house throwing cans at their window or I'm kicking their dog when they walk them. I'm doing something positive that they remember. You do that 20 times over the course of 3 years. That's a lot of positive memories. So you don't have to be at conferences, hand out your card, telling people what you do. One of the cheat codes is be in the favor business. Be someone that other people think that person is always of value to me. They always have something. And we all have something. You could be somebody who likes cooking.
Right.
Throw potluck parties at your house.
Hmm.
I sponsored a golf trip for 10 years. I sponsored a cycling trip in France a couple of years ago. So there's you can throw a barbecue, you can have a book club, you can do all sorts of things that are in your spades nights. I mean, it doesn't matter, but be in the business of being helpful to people and play what I call the karma lottery. And it
Right.
comes back to you. It comes back to you.
Exactly. I actually love what you just mentioned and the examples you gave because everybody needs help, right? Who doesn't need help in this world? We all do.
I mean, our wine club, I am, if you put it on an education level, I would say I'm maybe a senior in college, an honor student, but a senior in college. I'm not the PhD level, I'm not a sommelier or anything, but I have, I think, one, helped people educate themselves about wine. So I am the forum through which I help create the forum through which they increase their wine knowledge, which helps them. Number two, I'm creating this forum for great memories. We have fun. We're talking. Oh, I haven't seen you in a while. People come to the wine events who don't otherwise socialize. And number three, they're seeing parts of Portugal. Sometimes it's people from out of town who are visiting that are visiting on their vacation. Sometimes it's people that are here. They're like, hey man, I've lived here 3 years. I know about this little corner wine bar. Well, that's what I do. I find the corner wine bars and sample them, and then we all show up. So you can do something as simple as that and underestimate how much value it adds to people. And if you do that consistently throughout your career, you're just going to create the positive energy, the positive brand where people are going to be rooting for you. And you'll ask somebody, hey, do you know somebody at Nike? Do you know somebody at Peloton? I want to work for the LA Lakers. And you'll be surprised how people go out of their way to help you. And they'll say, I'll give you one last example. I I interview people all the time, all the time. So I interviewed somebody. The woman calls me and she says, you gave me great career advice. I said, okay, thank you. And I'm acting like I know who she is. I don't really know. I interview people all, 20 years, there's thousands of people.
Right.
I was like, oh, great. I'm so glad I helped. She's like, well, I am now a producer and I'm casting for a reality show online. And I think you'd be perfect for it. So, long story short, I get flown out to Beverly Hills to be on this show called The Job Shopper, where I play the interview person, the recruiter that they got to get past. It's amazingly fun. I had another woman who calls me and says, we were doing a search for the Obama administration, the Obama Foundation for their head of HR. A woman says, you called me for that. I was not getting paid for this. I was doing this as a friend to give them candidates because we were starting our firm. She said, I was a candidate on that search. I did not get the search, but you were so helpful to me. I said, okay, thank you. Again, I don't remember her either. And she says, I am being tapped by Prince's estate to do the search for someone to lead Paisley Park after he's died. and I think you'd be perfect. I need you to meet the family and the lawyers and the bankers. And so I'm like, really? I meet the family, the bankers, and the lawyers, and I recruit the first person to lead Paisley Park after Prince's death. I go to Chanhassen, Minnesota. I'm hanging with his bandmates. I'm looking at videos in the hotel after I'm like, that's the guy I just met with. He's in the Money Don't Matter video. This guy was in the, in the revolution, right? And that's just a good deed. And maybe I'm good at my job and I gave him good advice, but I was in a posture to help them. And look how it comes back. That's not only just a cool thing, that's money. That's
Right.
money.
Exactly, exactly. You just never know where people can turn out.
That's right.
Right. Whether it works out for the moment of transaction or not, it's just positive energy, giving people positive energy. So so I know you mentioned a little bit about the next career transition blueprint. Would you mind giving us some insights into the next career transition blueprint, and how does it, I guess, involve executives that they can apply in their career journey, or how you recommend executives to use it?
So the career transition blueprint, which is available at protégeleadershipacademy.com, is something you can use for the entirety of your career. So if you're in a job search, it's obviously very applicable the day you use it, the day you purchase it, it is available that day and it is helpful that day. But it's also helpful if you are not in a job search. And I
Mm,
give people, I've talked about this a lot in my podcast, that there are sort of stages of when you should be activating yourself in a job search. The short answer is you should almost always be in a job search. You
yes.
should always be in a job search. When you are doing fantastically well at
Yes.
your company or organization, and a recruiter like me calls you, you should take the call.
Right.
You may not be in a job search where you're actively looking, but here's what could happen. I call you and I say, hey, I want to talk to you about this SVP of marketing job. I say, okay, well, I'm an SVP of marketing, but I'm really happy. I don't really want to leave now. You should ask me, what does that role pay? It pays a base of 300,000 with a 50% bonus and a 50% long term. Oh, okay. So all in about 600,000? Yes. And you look up that company, and that company is a peer of the employer that you work for, and that role is paying $600,000. And it's basically the same role you have, but you're making $400,000. You're making 200 as a base, 50% bonus, 50% long term. And so you ask the recruiter again, how many of these searches have you done like this? And what is the typical compensation? That person will likely go to a database and say, oh, we've done about 15 searches like this in the last 10 years and last 2 years. And the average compensation is 625.
Mm,
What do you do with that information? You go back to your boss. He
yes.
loves you. And you've just gotten exceeds expectations. And you basically, there's a way to do this. We talk about a blueprint where you basically negotiate your salary a little bit higher. That's if you're extraordinarily happy. You don't want to move. There's still a benefit to dipping your toe in the water in the job market. If there are business disruptions happening, if you see some things coming down the pike that may impact your company or your organization, you should probably be doing some
Mhm.
things in the blueprint, like activating your network, getting your resume and LinkedIn together in a way in case it falls apart quickly, you're able to do it. And then there's level 3, which is you think you should be doing a job search, but you're not unemployed. You think that, look, in 30 to 90 days I'm going to be out of a job. Obviously, then when you are without a job. So all throughout those life cycles, from you being an extraordinarily happy,
Mm.
well-placed executive that doesn't want to leave to you are unemployed, the career transition blueprint has amazing utility to help you.
Amazing, amazing. I love the strategy of asking questions and being curious.
Mhm.
It just doesn't hurt anyone to know more information about what's going on the market or in your company. So thank you for
That's
sharing
right.
that piece of advice. How can leaders effectively navigate career transitions while they're maintaining great confidence and resilience?
I think that you have to make a a habit of building some resilience into your executive persona.
Mm,
and you have to make a habit of sort of staying ready. I'm from New Orleans, and I used to work for a utility company. And of course, when there are hurricanes or natural disasters, the utility companies are front and center because the power goes out. And so all the executives who worked at the utility company had a ready to go bag that had the stuff you need. It may be important papers, it may be closed for 3 days, because when there's a serious hurricane, we had to go to a hotel and hunker down and make sure we could be a command and control center for the mayor, for the governor, that kind of thing. And so you need to have that in your career. You need to have a ready to go bag that
Mm,
includes the tips and techniques that you can activate to activate a job search if you need it. And so that's what we encourage people to do. That's what the blueprint helps you do, is to really always be ready, because this economy, and I don't think it ever is going to show any signs of being different, it's dynamic.
hmm
There are vectors bearing upon the economy and your career. One is politics, one is technology, one is globalization. So, and there are other minor issues. You put those three things together, that there's somebody abroad that can do your job better than you, that can do it more cheaply, that your job may be eliminated because of policy or because of AI.
Right,
You got to stay ready.
right.
You got to stay ready.
Always, 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 constantly changing on our toes.
That's right.
No time to rest right now. Thank you so much, Roy, for this amazing conversation. We've learned so much, your words of wisdom, your experience, and also giving us a reference of a blueprint that we can follow. How can our listeners connect with you if they would like more support or want to support you in your initiatives? What is the best way for them to reach out to you?
So they can check out the Protege Leadership Academy on YouTube. I do a weekly show about career success for mid-career professionals and executives. And at protégeleadershipacademy.com, they can find information about the career transition blueprint, all that it entails. People can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's free, at Rory Verrett. And you can see, my bio and people that have taken some of the courses that I've done that are part of the blueprint, and join the community there.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for today. We appreciate your time. Until next time, thank you everyone for tuning in today. And if you have not subscribed again, please subscribe to all of our social media platforms, especially Spotify. Thank you.
Thank you.